this when I speak all over the world. I say, ladies, I said, raise your hand if you heard the hormone estrogen. And I guarantee right now, everyone in the podcast would raise their hand. And I said, listen, ladies, that's why you're sick. Estrogen is not a hormone. And people are like, well, what are you talking about, doc? Yeah, estrogen is a hormone. No, it's not. Estrogen is a term that describes many hormones. So I'm going to ask every woman in the world, which I've done now for 23 plus years. Ladies, how we understand that testosterone is dominant to a guy, okay? And so you get testosterone, free testosterone. Yes, we have all the other hormones just like you do, just like you have testosterone, free testosterone, but that's our dominant hormone. Your dominant hormone is estrogens, and say it with an S, not estrogen. And I sat there back at 24 years old with the thinking I had from being a chiropractor and said, how can we assess a woman properly from a physical and a mental need if we don't have a picture of all those hormones? And I realized I've seen over 100,000 plus labs in my career. I've taken care of thousands of women. We take care of millions of women over the last 23 years in all our clinics. And in my whole experience, I've never seen anybody test hormones right yet today besides us. And I know it sounds like a bragging statement, but it's not, because I'm going to ask anybody on a podcast and that's saying, listen, have you had all of your estrogens tested? And I've never seen anybody have it done yet. Okay. Now my point is this, because I said there, oh wait, guess what? There's two different forms of them. There's some that are produced by the ovaries, produced by the fat tissue, produced by the adrenals, which actually a lot of that can even be measured in the blood. And that's why my wife, the dominant cyclic hormone being 23, she had estradiol done. And I looked at it going, but wait, they're missing some of the major hormones because my wife's estradiol was normal. And that didn't make sense considering the fact that she actually had a estrogen-based condition like endometriosis that was so bad. I said, we got to look at all the estrogens. And I started calling labs. I said, can we measure these? They're like, yes, we can, but why? Insurance doesn't pay for it and it's not standardly done. I'm like, I don't care what's standardly done. I have a sick, beautiful woman that's actually suffering. And I understand that her endometriosis has got to be more dominant in estrogens because her progesterones were a little bit low, but it wouldn't have been that bad. And then I measured the rest of her estrogens, and they can only be measured by doing 2 tests at once. And so if you just had blood or just had urine or just had saliva done once, you have an incomplete view. You cannot get all of them from one test. So here I am, 24 years old. Now I'm starting practice. And I said, you want something? I'm just going to start testing all the women's estrogens. And then I started to figure out what was making them bad. And then I started reversing all this process and restoring them normally. And I can tell you, from breast cancer to endometriosis to infertility to PCOS, give me any condition that has been talked about from a female hormone condition. If you actually give that body what it needs, your body's genetically programmed for homeostasis and it wants to go back there. And breast cancer is not normal. Endometriosis is not normal. You're not genetically prone for that and stuff. And that's been so disproven. But if you have bad estrogen levels of the ones that are supposed to actually maintain your breast tissue, guess what happens? You have a gene process. You're just setting yourself up with a loaded gun. So I know there's a long kind of description to set that stage, but that's how it started 23 years ago. And of course, then we just expounded upon it. Now it's given me an opportunity to speak all over the world of this.
That's amazing.
As a male.
Right. Which is a great story. And like you mentioned, you've touched the lives of millions of women around the world. And it's such an important topic because it's so misunderstood. Now, we'll get back to the hormones in just a minute, but you wrote a book called I Disagree. That's a very interesting title. So why did you write a book and why did you name it I Disagree? Actually,
to be transparent, I never wanted to write a book. I've always been obsessed with clinical outcomes. And then my team got together and said, Doc, you need to put a book together. I'm like, I gotta put a bit of care. Because a lot of people love the written word. And I'm not joking. I was against it because I'm like, listen, I'm not a writer. I'm a speaker and I can go speak and I'm a clinician and things like that. So all of a sudden, my wife, one of our investigative journalists, and we put together the book. And I can honestly tell you, I've never been through the full book to this day, but it's all my material that I put together through all the years. But there's one thing, and my wife injected her story through the process that way. And it was interesting because we put it out on Amazon, and within 1 week, it was actually in 3 days, it was an international bestseller. And we still sell so many copies every single year. And I'm surprised because it came out in May. May will be this 3 years. But it was interesting because I want you to imagine this. There have been so many women across this world that have been told this is their only avenue. And doc, I can guarantee, knowing your history, that you've heard that so much, is this is the only thing you can do. And I've heard that so much. I say, you know, something I disagree. I disagree with what they tell you is your outcome. They told my wife they could never have kids. I've heard that thousands of times. Infertility was the main thing I dealt with in my 23-year career. You know, I dealt with every female condition, but obviously infertility is one of the most emotional things next to breast cancer. And I just looked at what the medical and the natural alternative field is doing. And I disagree with it dramatically, because I think that we are really just trying to do an alternative form of medicine instead of a restorative part of healthcare, which, I'm sorry, people say, where'd you come up with the idea? I came up with the idea because I read some green books about a guy that wrote them 100 years ago. And that's why it's surprised when I speak at medical schools, or speak at medical conferences, or speak at political conferences. Like, doc, we love what you're doing. Where'd you come up with this? I said, I didn't. BJ Palmer did. And I'm surprised that in healthcare. Now, people say, well, doc, you kind of brought it into what's happened today. Yes, I'm very proud of the things I've accomplished. There's things I've done that BJ hasn't done. But I believe that his thinking is what set it down, that allowed me to even get us to the point we are. So then that's why when I see things like hormones or COVID or things like that going on, there should be a chiropractor like us sitting at the table going, listen, you're looking at this wrong. Mm-hmm. And I think I've proven that from a clinical standpoint. I think that I've done that with COVID and all that stuff that way. And I believe that that's where we belong. We do not belong as physio pain therapists, when we can actually bring life to a woman's body where they could never have children, or we can actually reverse these hormone problems mentally and physically that, guess what, that they can't do medically or even alternatively.
Absolutely. So you have a public seminar called The Hormone Connection. And
yes,
we know that conventional medicine has really vilified women's hormones when it comes to breast cancer. You know, you have breast cancer and you have an ER positive or PR positive cancer. So we've got to give you medication, whether it's aromatase inhibitors or SERM drugs, to really, you know, stop the production of hormones, because those hormones are driving the cancer. So what do you tell your patients, clients, doctors when they come to you and say, you know, I'm at a crossroads. They want me to take these drugs, but, you know, I feel so bad when I'm on them. What do I do to, you know, to really balance my hormones?
Well, let's go back to some of the most basic things. Okay. If it was based on just hormones itself, by nature, we all know this. The majority of people that end up with breast cancer are in postmenopausal ages, when actually estrogens, everything are lowest. Now, it doesn't mean you don't get it in your 30s and 40s and stuff like that. I actually take care of women that got breast cancer in their 20s. Okay. Now, that's not the most average one, but it's actually more after 50. But here's the point. Okay. And I'm going to show you guys, it's actually this simple. Okay. So let's talk about the genetic factor first. So therefore, if you say, well, doc, that my gene can respond and I actually have more aspect of actually having breast cancer, they'll say, well, that's true if your estrogen levels are elevated. Normal estrogen levels do not give you breast cancer. Okay. And understand that. So therefore, because otherwise what will happen is you would end up with breast cancer at 13, 14, 15 years old when you actually were cyclic. You're saying, because your gene did not change. The genes were there since you were born. And like, never thought of it that way. Once again, a different perspective. So let's go on here. So I want you to think about this. The majority of your hormones, ladies, believe it or not, are actually not produced. They're converted. So let me talk about that. If you look at all the estrogens, and the reason why you have to measure them in two different ways is if you look at your estradiol, young ladies, which, for example, let's say you got your cycle when you're 15, 14 years old, your estradiol will be produced at a high level. And so will estrone, which is more based on menopausal ranges. But you have all of them your whole life. And then you convert that to the weakest form, your E3. So most women probably watch this know E1, E2, and E3. But E3 is actually not really produced at all. It's actually converted. It's actually known as a metabolite. And they say, well, doc, what's a metabolite? Metabolite is converting a fat-soluble molecule into a water, or even a different fat-soluble molecule, a different hormone. Okay? That's what the liver does. That's why people don't realize when a woman has a problem losing weight, they say I have a metabolism problem, you have a conversion problem. You can't convert fat-soluble things to water-soluble things. Well, what do you think hormones are? Hormones itself are a fat-soluble molecule. Now think about this. So you get that production. Now wait. In order for that estradiol and estrone to not even be detrimental, it has to convert to certain forms so it can be eliminated. You don't want estradiol pumping out in the GI tract like crazy, because it'll cause actually intestinal cancer. That's why a very common cancer with breast cancer is actually intestinal cancer, because your body's trying to dump that hormone out. And so what does it do? It actually replicates those cells just as quick too, because estrogen is going to do its job. Now let's do this. So it's got to be converted to other beneficial protective forms, and also forms that actually can be eliminated much easier too. And also there's a stronger form to even make your breast tissue and everything develop at a good rate, which is a metabolite. So if you think about this, a production problem isn't the most significant thing. Most women are not producing hormones so high unless you have some tumor, or have some excessive fat tissue, or have some pituitary tumor. What happens is, I want you to think about this. I want you to think about sitting in a tub with 10 drains and only one is available. It's going to overflow. See, it's about converting those hormones out. So that's why we look at this. If you can't metabolize and convert those things out, ladies, they're going to recirculate. And then when they recirculate, they're going to do their job. And their job is to proliferate tissue, breast, fat tissue, organs. And the thing is this, and that's why there's so much breast cancer today. We do not need breast cancer awareness. I'm sorry. I think every woman's aware of breast cancer now. We need a different perspective to go, hey, why is it that hormone that's supposed to do its job, that makes me a young lady, that takes me to womanhood, that actually helps my uterus regenerate every single month, is now they're telling me it's a bad thing? It's because the doctors have been taking care of you since you were little, have no clue how to teach you to maintain your hormones. So therefore, you're going to end up with some hormone-based condition later in life because you never taught how to take care of them. Their biggest thing is to take an endocrine disruptor called birth control. Really? And you're the hormone experts? I'm sorry. I'll disagree with you and I'll debate you all day long, and I'll win the clinical outcome on this.
So how do women metabolize their hormones properly? What are the techniques that you use?
So let's look at this. Let's look at just if you're a cyclic woman, okay? And this, if we look at, now I'm going to get a little, am I allowed to get a little scientific on your pathway, on the podcast?
Yeah. Okay,
because I want you guys to understand that this is so clinically simple. And everything is backed massively by research. And that's why I go speak at other major schools that are not natural. Because remember, when I walk into the medical school, they think that my degree came from a Cracker Jack box.
Right.
And then when I'm done, they're like, you think I'm joking? The last medical conference I taught at, a pediatrician ran right up to me and said, "Doc, teach me how to be that kind of doctor." And I said, it's not that hard. You're just not led this way. So long story short, so ladies, let's just take your cyclic hormone estradiol. Now, once again, that has to convert in a certain pathways. So for example, one elimination pathway, and remember, I'm going to say this slow, so you can actually just run on DuckDuckGo and stuff like that and research this stuff. But if you look at the CYP1A1 pathway, that converts your estrone, your estradiol, into a more protective form called 2-hydroxyestrone estradiol. Well, doc, there's drugs that they do just like the aromatase pathway, because you aromatase inhibit. But what if I told you there's even natural things you could aromatase inhibit with? But we won't get into that right now. But let's keep on going this. So your body, young ladies, produces these wonderful estradiol, estrone. Now it's got to be converted down to its more protective 2-hydroxyestrone estradiol, and then converted into our 2-methyl. And I think that right alone should actually teach you right there. If it's called 2-methyl, you're going to need some methyl groups for its conversion. Methyl groups for its conversion. I think a lot of people know where I'm going with that. But even just the conversion down your CYP1A1 pathway, there's these little things out there that God created in nature that actually support and help maintain and restore that pathway to normal. It's called cruciferous vegetables. Now, here's what happens. Well, doc, I took cruciferous vegetables and it didn't help me. But do you know why? Let me see your labs. Oh, wait, you don't have labs. So you don't know if that was one of the pathways that you had a problem with. Because if you just take more cruciferous vegetables, eat more cruciferous vegetables, and that pathway is normal, it ain't going to do anything for you. This natural movement of just take this because it's good for estrogens, that's not true. You're so unspecific. You're leading that woman down the wrong path, and you're actually just giving them 50 bottles of supplements. So I know I make both sides kind of upset, but I'm just want our clinical outcomes to be the best, and it can't be done without proper testing. Because that's why when you look at going, okay, listen, doc, there's another pathway even converting estradiol to estriol, the weakest form of estrogen, and it's called the CYP3A4 pathway. Now imagine this, guys. I'm 24, 25 years old. I started studying the pathways and realized that they have drugs that convert these things. So no one taught me how to actually restore these pathways. I started looking, going, okay, these drugs do this. What if I could find something in nature that could do this? I did this back late 90s, early 2000s. There was no books on this stuff. I kind of wrote the books on this stuff. And so I was sitting there going, do you know something is this? St. John's helps that. And see, now I want you to think about this. If you talk to a patient and go, St. John's is contraindicated when it comes to psychiatric medications. And people say, because it interacts. Okay, so what does interaction mean? Interaction does not mean that the herb and the drug are having a battle inside your brain, inside your GI. It means that by taking that St. John's, you metabolize that drug faster and there'll be less of an effect. That's why St. John's is contraindicated in certain medications, because it wipes out the system. But imagine this. There's medications that inhibit that pathway, that inhibit your own estrogens from leaving, and certain drugs can cause you to have breast cancer. See, when you're obsessed with all these pathways, which can be tested and have to be tested properly, now I can relate a plan of a great clinical outcome. But then these cool things, this, as people actually think I'm so obsessed with testing, which I am. I'm actually more obsessed with retesting, seeing the clinical outcome comes, besides just the result of what they see with the breast tissue or see with the uterus and see with these things. And guess what, ladies? I don't have any breasts, I don't have a uterus, but I'm obsessed with it.
That's great.